Thank you, Dean Maglaris, faculty, and staff. Thank you, Steve Nelson and the Business School class of 2021 for sharing this day with me. And of course, congratulations to you and your families. You'll notice that in the program, I'm listed not as your commencement speaker, but as today's distinguished speaker. Distinguished. That's kind of a funny word, isn't it? At its most literal, it means someone who is atypical, incongruous, abnormal, maybe even a little weird. I would be proud to be called any of those things, which is why, as I stand here today, my greatest hope is to inspire each one of you to be distinguished in all the ways that are specific and peculiar to you. Graduates, in the spring of 1993, I was sitting where you are today. And even then, I was more than a little certain that I was different, distinguished, from many of my fellow graduates. I was an immigrant, an outsider, thanks to the Iranian Revolution of 1979. I was financially insecure, more than most, I would imagine, because I had lost my father in an accident. And I suspected that I was different than my fellow graduates, because rather than desperately looking for a job, I was desperately looking for a calling. You see, I had already made the mistake of taking a job for the money. The previous summer, at a time where I desperately needed money, I worked at an investment bank, thinking, maybe my calling, it could also be unbelievably well-paying. I began asking everyone at the bank, would you do this job if they didn't pay you the big bucks? Most people looked at me a little bit perplexed, except for one guy who told me he loved the yield curve. He clearly had found his calling. Now, don't get me wrong, I liked my paycheck, but I didn't love the yield curve, which helps explain why, 1 year later, despite my student loans, I signed up for one of the lowest paying jobs of anyone in my graduating class, a job in advertising. Unlike the rest of my class, and probably many of you, I didn't have a 3-year plan, I didn't have a 5-year plan. What I did have was lots of ideas, and the willingness to go all in on these ideas, no matter how crazy or distinguished. So now, almost 30 years later, I'm here to tell you that you can pay your bills, pursue your passion, and find success. So here's my 4-step plan for what you can do to have a very rewarding career. Number 1, find something you care about. Turns out, finding a calling, it's kind of too high of a bar. While part of me was waiting to figure out what I was destined to be and willing to starve for, I began making lists. Lists of things I cared about, no matter what those were. I cared about throwing parties, and I put it on the list. I cared about travel, journalism, movies, fashion, New York City. My list, it's long, and I bet that yours is too. Of course, making a list isn't enough. So point number 2, you gotta do, you have to do. When I found things I cared about, be they people or companies, I reached out, and I still have the letters to prove it. Whether it was the guy who was opening up a 1950s diner on the corner of 116th and Broadway where Shake Shack is, or Robert Stigwood, who was making Evita, the movie, in Argentina, or the Outward Bound School in Lesotho, where I wanted to work. Most of these letters, yes, pre-internet, they went unanswered. But you know what? That didn't stop me. And then there was that one time when somebody did respond. In college at Barnard, I'd written an insider's travel column. And then I saw a campaign, a print campaign by The Gap called Individuals of Style. Nationally, they featured famous celebs like Kim Basinger wearing a classic white t-shirt. The campaign was so successful that they localized it. In New York City, they featured indie star John Lurie, a musician who'd been in all the early Jim Jarmusch movies. John Lurie used to hang out at a dive bar in the East Village called Max Fish. I'd written about this in my travel column. So this made me think, I should partner with The Gap, and I should combine my travel column with their pictures, creating an insider's city guide. Then comes doing. So in just one Sunday afternoon, I mock up the guidebook, and I finagle a meeting at Gap headquarters. But nothing came of it. Fast forward to business school, when a classmate, Debbie Getz, sees the mock-up in my bookshelf, and she says, "Mickey Drexler, the CEO of The Gap, just spoke to our retailing class. You should send this to him." Turns out Debbie gave great advice, something she's continued to do in the 30 years we've worked together ever since business school. So I double down on my idea yet again. I sign up for Professor Jadidi's market research class, and I use the book as my case study. Then I write a letter, and I mail it along with the mock-up to Mickey Drexler, the Gap CEO. Bias to action, AKA do. It's finals, and the phone rings. And it's Mickey. He's looked at my insider's guide, and he wanted to connect. He wanted to know if I was interested in a job at the Gap. I hadn't really thought about a job. I was focused on making my guidebook. So he sets me up with his head of recruiting, who tells me that I should consider a career in marketing, because my idea, it's really a marketing idea. So although the insider's guide never saw the light of day, it led me to what I'm doing today. Turns out the insider's guide was really an insider's guide to me. I was a marketer. So, point number 3, find your purpose, your why. In other words, anchor your do in your purpose. Turns out I was a millennial before my time, or so my much more millennial sister Susie always tells me. You see, at the time, I didn't know what my purpose was, or even what a purpose was. But in looking back, I clearly did, and it was guiding my career decisions even before I could explain it to myself or others. That is why, despite my need for financial security, I moved from job to job when something was amiss. So, here's my resume after B School. Y&R Turner, City Search Macmillan, Ammirati, my own bag business, my own consulting business, Univision, NBC, Gannett, Hyatt, and now Nextdoor. It felt like my mom, she never called me at the same job twice. So, let me save you some time and some unnecessary printing of business cards. Purpose is the only roadmap you'll need. It's a way to understand what drives and inspires you. It helps you make better decisions because it gives you a framework. And most importantly, it helps you understand your non-negotiables. It doesn't matter if you've already taken a job or if you're still looking. Finding your purpose will help you navigate an authentic and intentional course that allows you way more flexibility than a 3 or 5 year plan. Now this brings me to 4, my final point. Do and do together. After Hyatt, I took some time off. My kids, Natasha and Nikki, they call it my gap year. Even in a gap year, I started doing. I spent time exploring Chicago, the city I'd been living in for 3.5 years, but barely knew. I spent time with family and friends. I wrote articles, I joined boards, and I took on consulting projects. But something was amiss. I missed working with others and making a difference. So I arrived at a 4-box or 4 questions to help me figure out what was missing. And today, I share those with you. Graduates, from this day forward, here are 4 questions you can ask yourself before considering a job. Do you care, as in believe? Do you get to work with people you respect? Can you learn? And most importantly, can you have impact? These are the questions that brought me to Nextdoor. So, what is Nextdoor? Nextdoor is an app founded to help you plug into the neighborhoods that matter to you, to connect you to your neighbors digitally, but in order to connect with them in real life. It's about leveraging technology to enable human connection. Now, I started working at Nextdoor 3 weeks before the pandemic. No, I didn't have a magic 8-ball. No, I didn't predict the pandemic. And no, I didn't know that neighbors and neighborhoods is where it's at. I simply made a decision based on my purpose: to create connections that build communities that make a difference. Now, let me take this moment and acknowledge how difficult this year has been. We humans, we actually need each other, and yet we've had a year where we've experienced collective disconnection on a global scale. No one fully understands the consequences of what we're still experiencing: the loss, the strain, the long-term mental health implications, and yet We are the lucky ones. Something the pandemic helped me realize is that we need to spend time doing good for our community, or at least try, and be kind, or at least always, always try. In August, tired of all the stories of New York City being dead, my husband Andy, who by the way I met in Professor Leff's macroeconomics class, and I emailed a few friends to say, who is in to help the city we love? And New York City Next, an idea, a grassroots movement, was born. Our purpose, to position New York as the creative and innovative city that will spark its next great era through the resilience and creativity of its residents. We came together to do. 14 pop-up events in 3 boroughs and 7 neighborhoods has only been possible because of the 600+ volunteers who all give of themselves for the collective we. We have experienced firsthand how stepping up to help turns your despair into purpose. It has given us positivity, joy, and most importantly, an incredible sense of community. So in closing, let me say, despite this crazy pandemic year, we are the lucky ones. You today are graduating from one of the top business schools, and for my money, the best. Your hard work has earned you the privilege of joining an amazing and powerful community. As you go forth, remember, you are part of the Columbia Business School community and a part of the greater Columbia University alumni community. I can tell you that New York City Next has been enabled in great part by the amazing network that Columbia University has afforded me. And this is a gift you get by virtue of just being here today. So, what are the 4 things I want you to remember? Pick something you care about. Do. Find your purpose and do it together. Columbia Business School class of 2021. You are graduating into a world where what makes you unique is what makes you indispensable. And into a time that demands that we prioritize we over me. Connect to your purpose and make a difference. And may today be the first day of your distinguished career. Thank you and congratulations in advance on all you are going to surely accomplish. That's my Mary Tyler Moore moment for you. Little trivia.